Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the Beretta APX A1 full size. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. This is the latest evolution of Beretta's APX line, and they've made some changes and definitely some improvements. Some of the changes are kind of neutral, the styling. So they've changed the slide serrations to be a little more mainstream. The original serrations, this is an APX carry, the original design, kind of styled like that. Not ugly or anything, just kind of different than everything else out there. So it was a bit polarizing. People kind of loved it or hated it. Now what you're seeing is, as you go towards the A1, like this A1 carry, and then of course the A1 full size that's in my hand, they've gone to more of the angled serrations you're seeing on pretty much everything out there in the mainstream. It's got a very nice deep beaver tail. You're very unlikely to get slide bit by this. They've gotten rid of the kind of the finger grooves that existed on the front of it. Biggest thing they've changed is the trigger. The trigger's a lot nicer. Of course, they're billing it as a best-in-class trigger. That might be a bold claim because the PDPQ and PDP would be in this class. And that's kind of a hard trigger to beat. But the trigger is actually quite nice. When I shot the first one, I found the trigger to be okay. It got the job done. It wasn't a bad trigger, but it wasn't a good trigger. It was just kind of okay. The trigger on this is actually quite nice. Now, an interesting thing I found with it, when I first took it out of the box, before I cleaned it or did anything with it, I kind of didn't like the trigger. It was kind of scratchy and it wasn't overly smooth. Cleaned and oiled it, it smoothed up quite a bit, which, okay, fine. I mean, you're supposed to clean and oil it before you actually take it to the range, which I always do. And the trigger kind of got better. Took it to the range, and at the range, the trigger was quite nice. Then when I got it back after taking it to the range, it smoothed out quite a bit. So now I would say the trigger is actually quite nice. So minimal take up. You're kind of almost right there. Very short, nice wall. Comes in around 6.5 pounds, but it feels lighter than that. And you'll see that it is stopped, and it's on an over travel stop. So there's a notch cut into the trigger guard there, and a little protrusion on the bottom of the trigger. And that it hits that back of the trigger guard and acts as an over travel stop. It's kind of an interesting feature. I'll move my finger away. You can kind of see it a little bit better. Of course, when I pull it all the way back, it goes into that slot and, of course, hides it. But that's kind of an interesting feature. Now, as far as the reset, so I pull the trigger, let it out. You're almost right on the wall. There's just a little bit of take up to get back on the wall, and then a nice break. Unfortunately, that reset is basically all the way out. But on the positive side, all the way out's not that far out. It's not a very long travel on the trigger. So one of the improvements they made to this is the trigger, and they've accomplished that. The trigger is much nicer. And, the best-in-class claim may be kind of a bold claim, but it's up there with the best-in-class, that's for sure. So kudos to them for addressing that. It does have a 3-slot Picatinny rail. Serrations, of course, are front and rear on both sides. So no matter how you want to cycle this thing, they're really easy to get a hold of. One thing you might see when I turn it over is see screws on the top. It is optics ready. You do have to buy plates for the different optics that you want. Some manufacturers are doing that. You have to go to their site and buy them. Other manufacturers are including them. To me, it's preferential to have them included even if the gun costs a little more, because sometimes you don't know what optic you're going to want. The front sight is a tritium night sight with a very distinct white ring around it. Put my hand up here and see if I can get the camera to focus. No, it's not going to focus. But when it is very, very visible at the range. Unfortunately, it does have a blackout rear sight, which has become quite popular lately. It's not my favorite type sight, but you'll see there's enough of a gap that you can find some target for reference. So I had to work a little harder to shoot this well, but definitely you can pull nice tight grips with this. So overall, I found the sights easy to use from a front sight perspective. There, I got the camera to focus on it. If that rear sight had either a U or dots, I'd probably find it to be really stellar. Of course, the sights are replaceable. They're dovetail, front and rear. So if you can change them if you want. And then of course it's optics ready, so you could drop the red dot of your choice on it. I found it an easy to shoot while gun. The trigger worked well. That front sight was easy to find. Once I figured out how to work with the gap on the rear sight so that I could find a little piece of target for reference, I could pull nice and tight groups with this. I did have a little more trouble with the prior version, the original one, pulling tight groups. The trigger was kind of inconsistent on that one. And so as you're pulling it through the trigger, sometimes it would break here, sometimes it would break there. I found this trigger to be very consistent. So again, it enabled me to pull nice tight groups. The controls are reversible so that you can reverse the magazine catch. You can also, you have anti-slide stop slide release without having to do anything. So it's kind of easy to set this up for left or right-handed shooters. It's got serrations on the front of the trigger guard, a very large trigger guard, so it's compatible with gloves, and a nice undercut. So when you get a hold of it, you get right up there. And of course, being a full size, it is a 3-finger grip. I'll put the magazine in it. It is a nice 3-finger grip. And it comes with 3 full wraparound back straps that you can change out with, depending on the back strap, whether it has an additional extended beaver tail or not. The beaver tail on this is good enough, though, that you get way up under there, and you're very unlikely to get slide bit by this. You'd have to really be holding it sloppy to get slide bit by it. It was a pleasure to shoot at the range. The texture is nice enough that it doesn't tear your hand up, but it stays right where you put it, so you aren't having to kind of fiddle around trying to keep the gun in place. It stays right where you want it to stay, and was quite comfortable to shoot and handled recoil very, very well. This particular one comes with 2 17-round steel magazines. There is a 15-round version and a 10-round version available. Not sure the exact purpose of the 15-round version, but of course the 10-round version would be for restrictive states. They're really good quality steel mags with a polymer base plate. So overall, everything seems to be well constructed on this. It's just a well executed gun. So let's do dimensions and specs before I take it apart. It is 7.5 inches front to back, it's 5.6 inches tall, and it's 1.3 inches thick. When you look at the back end of it, it looks blocky, kind of a Glock-shaped back end, but it looks fatter than it is. 1.3 inches is a reasonable thickness. It's not super thin like some of them, but it's not a great big fat thing either. So it is reasonable. And it weighs 29 ounces unloaded. So it's kind of consistent with pretty much everything out there in the full-size Glock 17, full-size PPQ territory. It's pretty consistent with all of those. MSRP of $529 is a reasonable MSRP. That's what a lot of them are going for. Actually, it's less expensive than a Glock 17, which I believe has an MSRP these days of $549. So it's actually priced reasonably given what it is. And it has a 4.25 inch conventional rifling barrel. I'll go ahead and take it apart, and that's going to be the one thing that they did not improve, that I was hoping they'd improved when I heard that they came out with a new one. It's the same takedown procedure as before. You can use this button to disable the sear, and you have to hold the slide back in just the right spot as you're pushing it, and then it'll disengage the sear. Or you can pull the trigger. Either one will get the done. The manual, which interestingly enough, this one didn't have a manual in the box. It had a folded up piece of paper, kind of like an old style map, with about 72 different languages for the safety information, but no manual. So I did look up online to see if there was any changes, and no, the process is the same. I don't like the takedown process on these, and I haven't all along. But it's still, if you had this gun, once you get used to using it, you learn the process, it's doable. But most of them are a lot less convoluted, fewer steps. So you've disengaged the sear either by pulling the trigger or by using this button. Then you have to push this button in, and it's going to be a kind of a push to do it. What I tend to do is I use my thumb, and then with another hand, push this lever down, and then it comes apart. Now the lever fell out on its own. It's not necessary to remove the lever. So if it doesn't happen to come out when you go to take it apart, don't worry about it. And if it does come out and it kind of flops around. Don't worry about that either. It's easy enough to either put it back in if it does fall out. If it doesn't fall out, leave it in. And when you go to put it back together, it just needs to be in this down position. Well, I've got the slide, let's look, or the frame, let's look at the frame. Really well constructed chassis style design. Kind of almost full length rail on this side. There's a cutout here for the slide stop slide release, and actually the slide stop slide release is up here. There's a cutout for the ejector. And then on the other side, a very long full end-to-end rail. Really robust rails. Everything in here seems to be clean and well constructed. So overall, they've manufacturing quality is high, which Beretta usually does do a good quality. Kind of a wafer captive recoil spring with kind of a solid end piece. It does feel like it might be a steel guide rod on this, because this end cap is steel and the front cap is steel. So they wouldn't sit well on polymer, so I'm suspecting that that guide rod itself may be steel. Then of course you have the barrel. Really nice polished feed ramp. It's kind of machine polished. You can see some of the machining marks when you get in there, but it's well polished and kind of a bit of a flange to it, so it should load reliably, and it did. This gun worked from round one till we were done with it. No break-in period was needed. And well done, sharp rifling. And again, this is a conventional rifling barrel. And the slide is quite simple. The striker is back up under there. You can see the springs for the striker. It does have all of the drop safeties that you're used to at a modern striker-fired gun. So it has the inertial toggle on the trigger, and then it has the drop safety plunger right here, which is a large, wide plunger. And the good thing about that is it should self-align, and with that nice ramp on it, should make it much smoother as you pull the trigger to disengage it, as the arm on the trigger bar rides up onto this. Kind of that'd be another way to smooth the trigger out a little bit, is a design like that. Overall, well manufactured, well done. Putting it back together is less interesting than taking it apart. It goes back together pretty much like any other gun. Put the recoil spring in, make sure it's centered. Just make sure that the takedown lever is in and pointed down. When I cycled it, it automatically flipped it up, so I didn't have to take any action, and I'm back in the game. So again, kind of not my favorite takedown, but once you learn the best way to do it, whether you choose to use that button or not, and you do it consistently, it'll be easy to do and easy to live with. It's just other manufacturers right now have come up with better ways to do it with a few less hands needed. And for clarity, I've talked about a button. It's that one right there. The thing I just hid with my thumb is a pin that holds the chassis in. So it's that button right there with kind of a concave insert into it. And then of course this is the thing that you push to be able to begin the takedown process. Overall, I like this gun now. I didn't like the original one. When the APX carry came out, I didn't particularly like that. The A1 improved the carry. The full-size one has taken that to the next level, and most notably, they've improved the trigger significantly. And that trigger is now actually quite a nice trigger. So if you're liking the APX series, you might want to check out the A1. If you were on the fence, kind of almost didn't like the APX, almost did, definitely check out the A1. That may flip you over to that side and actually kind of like the A1, whereas you might have been on the fence before. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, kind of everywhere. And thank you.